Beta Kayden, once a loyal member of the Silver Arrow Pack, faces the corruption and betrayal within. What will his choice be? After uncovering the conspiracy of former Alpha Bradley, can he escape safely and convey the crisis to the Moon River Pack in time? The game of power has never been this fierce. Subscribe to witness the duel between the Moon River Pack and the Silver Arrow Pack. Chapter 37. It was much to Luna Kylie's overwhelming relief and joy that she woke up one morning and was able to once again smell the scent of driftwood on the sheets, and see the color that had returned to her form. Who had been comatose for weeks after the wolfsbane punishment, briefly admonished her human for trying to attack Olwen at the function with the heirloom that had been created solely for self-defense, shortly before Kylie suppressed her again with a scoff. She didn't need to be reminded of that now. With her strength back, she could return to her duties as Luna of the Silver Arrow Pack, at least what was left of it. She'd wallowed in shame, having felt nothing but numb the past month wolfless and weak. The pack members that were left hadn't hesitated to openly show that they neither respected nor liked her. She'd learnt from her mistakes. It didn't matter if Olwen was now a Luna herself. Kylie was still Luna of the strongest pack in the forest. She'd heard that Alpha Aaron was in the process of negotiating a deal with Alpha Frederick that would surely bring up their numbers, so they were bound to bounce back after the massive setback they'd endured. And as for how both father and son were holding her responsible for making a fool out at the function, she knew she would have to hold her tongue next time. Her fellow leaders didn't need to know their flaws by having them being addressed out loud. She'd strode down to try and find Alpha Aaron and inform him of the good news, secretly pleased that some of the pack members she passed by either nervously avoided her gaze or shrunk back upon realizing her wolf had been restored. Much to her chagrin, however, she was stopped at the office building entrance by Gamma Edric, who informed her that Alpha Aaron, his father and Beta Kayden were in a deep discussion about something about they did not wish to be disturbed. In enthusiasm, Luna Kylie was very tempted to knock the Gamma unconscious and go to demand an audience with her mate, but held back after recalling that it would not make things look any better for her in Aaron's eyes. Forced to head back home, she decided on the next best thing. She would surprise her husband. He hadn't mentioned Olwen at all since they'd come back, and hopefully she could remind him exactly why he'd chosen her to be his mate in the first place. After dinner, Kylie spent the next few hours giving herself a relaxing bubble bath, before finding a translucent nightgown that she had last used the night after her and Aaron's marking ceremony. Wearing the comfortable fabric, which purposely had next to nothing beneath, she combed her auburn hair and went to light some candles up to their shared bedroom. She slid into bed after covering the sheets with rose petals, relaxing on her back and busying herself with the latest updates on the online bulletin before she heard the front door open sometime later. Her amber eyes lighting up, Kylie sat up and arranged herself into a more seductive pose, making sure to show off her curves more as she heard Aaron's steps slowly ascend the stairs. His driftwood scent came toward her long before the door opened, and she could finally raise her head and look her mate in the eyes with a confident expression. "Alpha Aaron, you're back. I was worried you'd forgotten about me." Aaron's expression as he looked at her was currently unreadable as he stayed put by the door. Figuring he could use some coaxing, Kylie swung her legs up and off the bed, getting up and sauntering towards him with her swaying hips. "I have my wolf back," she purred, reaching up and tracing a hand across his shoulder, remembering how that would drive him crazy back in the day. "I've missed your scent, and I know you've missed mine." She gently leaned closer to him, making sure to accentuate her figure in that revealing nightgown as she brought her lips ever so close to his. "Are you fucking kidding me?" Kylie stiffened at the repulsion in Aaron's voice. It sounded even more visceral in his tone now than when she'd temporarily lost her wolf. "What?" She was further caught off guard as Aaron pushed her away with surprising force, causing her to stumble back on the bed and scattering the rose petals all over the floor. Kylie had known Alpha Aaron was strong, but he never used force on her in this way. "Alpha," Kylie gasped, stunned by how easily her mate had just turned her down. I was just... Did you seriously think that if you seduced me, that I would magically forget about all the trouble you caused me and the silver arrow pack? Aaron snapped, glaring at her. You seem to have not learnt a thing even after losing Kiara for a month. I have learnt my lesson, Kylie exclaimed, sitting up with a desperate, pleading expression. I'll do better, both as your mate and your Luna. Do better. Eret scoffed at her words. All I asked of you was basic politeness and decency at the function, and you couldn't even fulfill that. You offended more than one leader with your blatant lack of awareness. And not to mention your pitiful attempt at poisoning Olwen. I couldn't help myself once you abandoned me most of the night and kept gazing after her like some lost pup. Kylie retaliated, her eyes flashing with anger. I'm supposed to be your mate. You chose me to be the Luna. Aaron emitted a low growl and made her flinch. Then you should have acted like a proper Luna. He snarled, not some jealous teenager. Kylie flushed red at his insult, and then Aaron shook his head and muttered under his breath. Had she changed places with you, I doubt Olwen would have done what you did. Hearing her name from the Alpha's lips immediately brought back every single fear that Kylie had thought up while in her wolfless state, and she flew into a rage. Don't you dare compare me to her. She stood up and stalked towards her mate. Olwen is not your mate anymore, and you should accept that. With her blood boiling, Kylie made to punch Aaron, but for all her strength, she was still no match for an Alpha. Her fist was halted mid-swing, and then Aaron's hand was around her throat and lifting her off the ground, making her wriggle and gasp for air. Her amber eyes gazed down into the Alpha's green ones with fear and pleading, but unlike last time, where it had been ours attempting to strangle her, she couldn't rely on Aaron to save her now. The look on the man's face as he held her above the floor, her feet dangling, was nothing short of venomous. It was a far cry from the excitement and desire his gaze once held for her. And then he spoke the words that she feared receiving the most. I was wrong to choose you over Olwen, Alpha Aaron spat, staring coldly at her. Perhaps I only loved you physically back then, but now, even looking at you makes me sick. Ever since you were given the post of Luna, you've become even more arrogant and impulsive. The more I think about it, the more I'm starting to believe that you were always like this, but didn't show it until you had the power to. Kylie kicked her legs to no avail, still choking as her eyes flapped between hers and Kiara's. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilgan, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing enthusiasm. Aaron's expression did not waver, the hatred within only intensifying. You are the most pathetic and disgusting wolf I have ever known. He released her like that, and Kylie immediately crumbled to the bedroom floor, taking in deep gasps of oxygen. Her hair was now a mess, and her heart was thudding madly at the thought that her chosen mate might have killed her. She barely had more time to recover and get back on her feet when Aaron's voice cut through the air again. I Alpha Aaron Young, reject Kylie Paxton as my mate. Kylie let out a shocked cry and collapsed back onto the floor, holding her chest as the sting of the rejection seared through it. Though not as intense as the rejection between two fated mates, it was no less painful. As much as the woman tried to brace against the pain and hold on, when she finally managed to stare at Alpha Aaron, his face was once again devoid of sympathy despite the similar sensations he was experiencing. It was as if even if the rejection killed them both, he wouldn't care. Kylie Paxton. Kylie gritted out, tears streaming down her cheeks from the effort. Accept your rejection, Alpha Aaron. At last, the pain stopped and Kylie caught her breath before gazing back up with forlorn betrayal written all over her face. She didn't take long to see that her mark on Aaron's neck had faded to leave a thin scar, and without looking into a mirror she knew the same had happened to her. With the reality of it all slowly dawning, Kylie sunk to her knees in a terrified panic and bowed in front of her now former mate, reaching for his feet. "No, Alpha Aaron, please. I'm sorry for everything I did. Please. Give me another chance, I'll try my best to be a good mate. To my agent extraordinaire, Mythical Lone. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I'll try to be like Owen if I have to. But that's just it, isn't it?" Aaron looked down at her and she scared with annoyance. "You're not Owen." Kylie began to actually cry and blubber, holding on to Aaron's leg. How could she show her face to the rest of the pack now? "Alpha Aaron, I beg of you. Please, don't do this to me. I'm not done," Aaron snapped, pulling back his leg. "I was in discussion with my father, and not only are you unfit to be Luna, but you are also unfit to be a member of this pack." Kylie's tear-filled eyes widened. "No, you can't mean that. Kylie Paxton, as of this moment you are also exiled from the Silver Arrow Pack." The Alpha continued firmly, taking a step back. "You are to change out of these appalling clothes into something more presentable, before you will be escorted out into the wilds. If you ever think of setting foot back in my territory again, I will not hesitate to have you killed." The ex-Luna sobbed as she felt the mind link with the rest of the pack sever itself at Aaron's words, leaving her a mess on the ground. "You have 5 minutes. Then get out of my sight." He turned and left the room, slamming the door shut behind him. "I heard Kylie departed the Silver Arrow Pack last night." Bradley spoke, entering the Alpha's office as Aaron was awaiting a response from Alpha Frederick. "Good job. Continuing to associate ourselves with that wretched she-wolf would not have gone well. To my agent extraordinaire, Mythical Lone, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Eyes fixated on the computer screen, nodded. "I only did what was necessary." Kylie had left the pack in a much more subdued and humiliated state than she had been without her wolf. She hadn't fought back or protested after all her initial pleas went ignored, and didn't give Alpha Aaron a single glance. Her head bowed as the pack warriors, led by Delta J, escorted her out the west side of the borders. "Now that Kylie has been taken care of, you should find a new Luna," Bradley reminded him gruffly, his eyes fixated on his son. "With the pack in the state it is, they need a better leader to assure them." "Dad, I understand." Aaron responded, trying to hide the exasperation in his voice. "I'll start the proceedings for finding another Luna soon." Oz growled with disapproval, sensing his human's reluctance to start the proceedings. He hadn't objected this time round when Aaron had chosen to reject Kylie, but whether it had been for the right reasons was a whole other question. "You'd better find someone sane this time round." The wolf snorted, and Aaron rolled his eyes. Nevertheless, after being pushed by his father to prioritize this, given a Luna was a show of strength. Alpha Aaron some and the remainder of the Silver Arrow Pack and informed them he would screen all the eligible she-wolves and select a new chosen mate out of them. By now, everyone else knew that Luna Kylie had been removed, and while there was an air of relief, there were still some worry faces directed at Alpha Aaron. He had been partially responsible for everything that had occurred by allowing that disgraced she-wolf to become a leader after all. Still, Bradley was right in the fact that for some, it provided an amount of hope that the pack could be saved after all. Word quickly spread, with pack members putting forward their wishes that their next Luna set a better example for the Silver Arrow Pack, and some she-wolves getting excited to get a chance to occupy the position themselves. But as he met with each candidate, he only spent the necessary amount of time with her before dismissing the woman and moving on to the next. All he could think about was that their scents didn't smell floral or sweet enough, that their hair wasn't the way he liked, even down to the way some of them laughed. As night fell and he looked through all the profiles of the she-wolves he'd screened that day, the only maiden in his head, the ideal one, had gentle grey eyes, soft lips and pale brown hair. Oz growled warningly. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. The alpha sighed in frustration, not responding to his wolf as he got up, headed into what was now his bedroom alone, and closed the door behind him. As he approached the bed he frowned, still sensing Kylie's green apple scent wafting off it. With a snarl of disgust, he yanked off the sheets and threw them into a laundry basket in the corner of the room, fitting the bed with a fresh new sheet in a matter of minutes. He crawled beneath the covers, turning off the light and lying on his back, staring at the ceiling. He'd chosen these new sheets after recalling Olwen had chosen them after she'd moved in with him, but after months of repeated washing and disuse, her scent had long gone. Aaron tensed with envy as he imagined Olwen halfway across the wilds, resting in Alfil Andon's arms this very moment. His mind brought him back to the night of the function, when he'd first seen her again in that beautiful dress. When she descended the steps with Landon, she looked like an angel, her movements making her practically float across the floor with grace. And when she'd finally greeted him, the smell of lavender and sweet honey almost made him drop to her knees. Aaron replayed the events of the night, except this time Luna Kylie wasn't there with him. He saw himself seizing Luna Olwen by the wrist and dragging her into the corridor while Alfil Andon was occupied, pinning her wrists above her head. "I missed you," he growled into her ear. And unlike in reality, where Olwen had treated him with polite civility and distance, the one in his fantasy shivered, a blush forming on her cheeks and her pupils dilating as she gazed up at him. "I missed you too." Aaron released a possessive groan, crashing his mouth directly onto hers. She gasped and immediately responded, the alpha greedily drinking in her scent as they kissed passionately. His hand trailed down her waist and pulled her thigh up against his hip. But he couldn't control himself for long, hoisting both legs around him before carrying Olwen off to the nearest bedroom and officially marking her as his. Oz pulling him back to reality. Aaron scowled as his hands clenched the sheets. Perhaps she wouldn't even have been at the function. They could have had her marking ceremony with him here in the Silver Act before he whisked her back to their shared home. But as things had gone, the last time he and Olwen had interacted in their shared home had been the day she caught him in bed with Kylie. He had thought Kylie was prettier, stronger, more capable of being the mate of an alpha. It took him almost 6 months to finally realize that Olwen had indeed been the better choice in every aspect, only for Landon to have gotten to her first. Aaron was missing the way Oz had pushed him to think about his ex-fated. He could still feel that his wolf was drawn to Olwen and Opal, but it was more subdued than before. In comparison to him, Oz was now trying to convince him to give up on their former mate and move on. It was as if he and his wolf couldn't agree on anything regarding their love life, ever since Olwen had originally been revealed to be his destined mate 2 years back. Just what was this woman doing to him? Aaron's phone pinged with a notification, and wanting some kind of distraction from his thoughts, he sat up to retrieve it. It was an email from Zluck would have it Alfil Andon of the Moon River Pack. Already feeling an unpleasantness rising in his gut before he froze at the word in the subject head. Challenge Chapter 33 Preparation. The afternoon after they returned back from the human town, the response from Alpha Aaron arrived. To Alfil Andon, "I accept your challenge." As agreed upon in the attached contract, the Alphas of the Silver Arrow and Moon River Pack will meet up on neutral grounds 2 weeks from now, accompanied by only our betas and pack doctors. The victor will receive the honor of becoming the strongest alpha and leader of the most powerful pack of the Evergreen Wilds. No cheating or assistance will be allowed. Regards, Alpha Aaron Young. Luna Olwen took over most duties for the Moon River Pack as her mate prepared for the challenge. Anden was already rather strong on his own, and Olwen for one knew that he was more than a match for Eren. But given Eren would definitely not give up the prestigious strongest pack in the forest title so easily, they could not let that guy down. It did mean that Anden was usually either in the forest patrolling or training at the gym, and that Olwen only at most saw him at night, but she didn't mind. Especially given that they were only going to plan to start a family once this hurdle was overcome. It was imperative that they both devote all their effort to preparing for it. Josh and Kale made the decision to officially mark each other, the latter having become the pack's de facto head of security by now. His new system, including the abolishing of a number of blind spots some of the cameras previously had helped some of the Moon River Pack patrols identify and deal with possible disturbances, such as rogues that strayed too close to the borders. Josh had witnessed his beloved mate progress from a shy, quiet man who didn't know his place at all in a pack to, well, a shy quiet man that absolutely knew and owned his place. Elise had been discharged from the clinic and was still living with Josh and Kale, but Dr. Enzo had become a frequent visitor to the home as well. As part of her recovery and strengthening her connection with her wolf, Enzo had insisted on her bringing Ember on daily runs, whether this was to truly benefit her health or allow him to spend more time was unclear. Regardless of how Enzo and Elise felt about each other, their wolves had been drawn to each other from day one. If not for the doctor's impressive self-control, his wolf fest might have marked Elise while she was still recuperating in his bed, or even after the two humans had locked eyes during Olwen's lunar ceremony. During the course of it all, several families from the Silver Arrow Pack arrived at the vicinity. Looney Olwen was able to vouch for them as their former pack member, especially after an unexpected reunion with Jessie. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. They'd heard of the strong showing of the Moon River Pack at the function, and had willingly undertaken the long journey here. The pack suddenly needed to host a lot more new members, with Gamma Josh having his hands full with observing and screening each of them, even with the new programs Kale had come up with. It was here that Anden and Luna Olwen decided to implement something they had been considering for a few weeks now. Considering the Moon River Pack was slowly but surely going to grow in size, they would need to appoint more authority figures than just the three. The Moon River Committee was formed and split into two groups. The first were the Alpha's subordinates Beta Elijah, Delta Cassidy and Gamma Joshua, and the second were the Luna's Beta Stella, Delta Lincoln and Gamma Marissa. The two factions could operate both separately and together depending on circumstances. Stella was pretty much a no-brainer. She had been training to be Beta her whole life and was more than happy to work with Olwen in a professional setting once more. Although there were some concerns that her mate was also on the committee, their very passionate debates on their perspectives when it came to literature was more than proof that their relationship would not make them biased towards each other. Lincoln and Marissa had been screened along with several other possible candidates before being offered the post. Lincoln was the best strategist amongst the pack warriors and had worked together with Cassidy on multiple occasions already. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. On the other hand, was an Omega but an excellent healer, who had volunteered at Dr. Enzo's clinic before. The appointment made waves on the online bulletin the others had received from the members of Alpha Eren's pack, but not to the extent that the Moon River Pack was getting now. It was estimated that given the amount that the Silver Arrow Pack had lost, that the Moon River Pack would reach almost twice their size in terms of population. With the official announcement of the upcoming challenge between Landon and Eren, many were confident that Anden would come out on top. While not officially confirmed, Jessie also informed Olwen and Stella she had heard rumors of Kylie being rejected by Alpha Eren and kicked out of the Silver Arrow Pack. Karma, many said, for stealing someone else's mate and then trying to hurt another Luna at a peaceful event. But rather than the glee that Stella, Jessie and many other former pack members expressed at this, Owen was merely indifferent. She'd stopped caring about Erin and Kylie a long time ago, even before running into them at the function. They were in her past, and the Moon River Pack was her future. Rather, the conversation she'd had with Priscilla back in Applewin, apparently that was the town name, consumed most of the Luna's thoughts. She'd realized that Bradley was selfish and cruel, but hadn't known it had been to such a drastic extent that he would have cheated on the mate he claimed to be devoted to so much. And given the physical resemblance of Priscilla's children to Aaron and by extent his father, the proof could only speak for itself. But it explained so much. The descent of the Silver Arrow Pack that the Moon Goddess had hinted to her about, Bradley's hidden affair must have been fairly significant to it. And the drugs that Oz revealed Aaron had used to numb his wolf whenever he slept with Kylie. It made sense to suggest that Bradley had done the same whenever he went to see Priscilla. That shed a whole new perspective on the supposed grief the then Alpha had gone through after the Roget axe resulted in the death of Luna Tess. He'd had a toast in her name at the function that year and even dedicated a whole wing of the library to her. Perhaps it was his guilt that he had indirectly caused his wife's death. No matter, this all meant that Felix and Tonia were Bradley's children and Aaron's younger half-siblings. To some extent they had claims to leadership as children of an Alpha, and Luna Olwen had offered to support the pair in any way she could regardless. To her surprise, however, while Priscilla appreciated the kindness, she politely turned her down. "We have everything we need," she assured her. "After we fled to Applewin, we found a way to settle down and blend in with humans. Tristan found a steady job, and we've managed to both provide for our kids and tell them their true heritage." She sighed and shook her head sadly. "I don't wish for my children to suffer the way my family and I did. The Evergreen Wilds is still a dangerous place to be for rogues, and the safety of my loved ones is far more important than me seeking revenge or justice. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Why did you tell me all this?" "Because I wanted at least one pack member to hear and understand my story," Priscilla answered, her gaze filled with resolve. Alpha Bradley buried it beneath falsehoods about rogues, and Keith and his followers twisted it into something else entirely to serve their purpose. No matter what happens to the Evergreen Wilds packs, I wanted one person to know. If you want to share my story with others, I won't stop you, but just don't tell them I'm here." Priscilla pressed her lips together. "I also heard of how Bradley's son was your fated mate, but he left you for another she-wolf. I wasn't surprised given his father, but you didn't deserve that. I hope you found happiness with Elf Landon." Olwen smiled softly and nodded. "Thank you. And yes, I have found happiness with Landon. That's good to hear." Priscilla smiled and glanced at the clock. "It's getting rather late. You should return to the motel before your mate starts to worry about you, but thank you for giving me a chance to speak. It's no problem. I know you said you don't need any assistance, but if you ever do need something, contact me." Olwen had spent the remaining night walking back and lying in bed next to Landon Epen thought. If what she had been told was right, then Bradley should have lost his Alpha post years ago. But other than the hint regarding the drug both him and his son had used, there was no concrete proof on their hands yet to seek an audience with the Alpha King himself. And with the challenge coming up, an accusation like this could look suspicious. All the more that the Silver Arrow Pack should be removed from their position of privilege. Landon had told her gently, cradling her in his arms. "If Bradley has really done such a thing, we can focus on that after the challenge is over. I guess we should focus on one thing at a time." Olwen stared at the motel room ceiling, feeling the warmth of her mate's embrace. "Am I doing a good job as the Luna?" Landon chuckled softly, cupping her face and directing her gaze to his. Not many Lunas would have to handle a function, preparing for a challenge, and a sudden surge in pack members within a few months. Given how new you are, you're handling things very well. Olwen relaxed slightly at the alpha's reassuring words. You sure? Positive? Ask any of our pack members and they'll tell you the same thing. Nylan placed a soft kiss on his wife's forehead. You've had to take over most administrative and daily procedures. And somehow you still have time to go to read to the school children and mediate pack disputes. I shall have to compensate you generously. His hand wandering down beneath the bed sheets made her jolt. Landon. The alpha chuckled at her reaction and briefly withdrew his hand to cup her face. I promise I will be thinking of you and the rest of the Moon River pack when I go for the challenge against Alpha Aaron. Tenderness in his blue irises. He is his pride to fight for, but I have my family. He leaned in and kissed Olwen on the lips this time now. Don't think about all that tonight. Olwen. Relax. His hand snuck back down before both Locke and Opal took over. Luna Olwen kept Priscilla's story to just Alpha Andon and Beta Stella for now. Until they got concrete evidence, he did not want to start further and unnecessary drama in the pack. Stella, who was discreetly more agitated by Brady and Alpha Aaron, now agreed to conduct more research on the drug used, and draft any mail to Alpha King Scott that they would aim to send after the challenge was over. Olwen had not met the Alpha King before. Alpha King Scott and Luna Queen Nira were the royal family that oversaw the pack regions in their continent, and at most visited the Evergreen Wilds once a year. At most, Bradley had definitely met them when he was Alpha, when the couple had made rounds to check in on each pack after the rogue attacks. The Alpha King was the only wolf in the country who could use an Alpha command, and in this case it was possible to extract a confession from a guilty party if he needed. But in the meantime, for the next week, life carried on as per normal, with a few surprises. A surprising amount of unmated wolves formerly of the Silver Arrow pack found their fated ones in their new home. Jessie and Olwen had become actual friends after she had arrived at the Moon River pack, the former admitting that she was responsible for the mass desertion of the Silver Arrow pack. While Luna Olwen was concerned after hearing all the verbal abuse and mistreatment the other had endured under Luna Kylie, she was glad to hear that Jessie was doing better these days. Jessie was also growing close to Marissa, who treated a few injuries she'd sustained while in the wilds. Now safely from the overbearing she-wolf's clutches, Jessie could relax. She was relieved and warmed to realize that the Moon River pack did not perceive nor treat her gaze the way her old pack had, and began to exercise and practice at the training center as much as she liked, sometimes even with Olwen. That even after all the instances of her friends and loved ones around her finding their mates, Luna Olwen still found herself surprised. She and Jessie paused in the middle of a sparring session as Delta Cassidy and Delta Lincoln both came in, Lincoln's eyes fixated only on Jessie. Mate, Lincoln growled, as the Omega gasped and jumped into his arms. Olwen was admittedly dumbfounded as Cassidy seriously could nothing faze this woman. Smirked. Do you two need some time alone? It was a late Friday night, after Landon had finished his training for that day, that he and Luna Olwen received a stun-mind link from Lincoln. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Luna, we found a wolf at the south border. Exhausted and barely moving. Is he a rogue? Landon's voice broke through the link cautiously. No, but I'm not sure what you will think of this. Lincoln seemed to hesitate before he went on. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Beta Kayden, or at least his wolf. He's drenched. Alpha Andon informed Luna Olwen to stay put where he went to gate the issue. And sure enough, the moment the wet and shivering wolf saw the Alpha approach, he shifted back into his human form. Alpha Andon. Beta Kayden gasped out, looking borderline delirious with a panicked expression on his face as he stared up at him. "I know. We've had our differences, but you have to listen to me. You have to delay the challenge. Aaron and his father are planning to. He didn't finish before he slumped over. He's exhausted," Dr. Enzo said, as Lincoln threw a blanket around Beta Kayden and motioned for a few warriors to help load him onto a stretcher. "It looks like he exerted himself consistently for a few days straight and waited for the alpha to get here before he finally succumbed to his fatigue. Bring him to the clinic, but observe him at all times. We have to wait and listen to what he says once he awakes," Landon instructed Lincoln and Enzo, who both gave him a sharp nod and did as he said. During the one day that Beta Kayden was still out, with his wolf heavy lifting to recuperate him, the Moonlit committee was in deep, cautious discussion considering his abrupt appearance. It has been barely 2 months since the function, and we've heard nothing from the Silver Arrow Pack other than Alpha Aaron accepting the challenge, Beta lied pointed out. "I wouldn't be surprised if the Silver Arrow Pack isn't being truthful about things." Beta snorted, being one of the few who knew more about that in the room. "They're still silent on the whole losing half of their numbers thing, not to mention the rumors of Luna Kylie being banished. She was trying to hide that she was a little concerned for Hyder given his current state, but after he'd made the choice to stay with the Silver Arrow Pack when they last talked, she was prepared to cut ties with him once and for all if something more occurred. Fortunately, no further speculation would be made once Dr. Enzo sent a mind link informing Landon and Olwen that Beta Kayden was awake. The pair made their way quickly to the pack clinic, where Kayden was propped up on a few pillows. He seemed to have recovered slightly from his exhaustive trip. According to Enzo, he had spent the past few days cutting straight across the wild from the Silver Arrow Pack, including hours of swimming. He bowed his head slightly as Landon and Olwen approached. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." "Luna." "Beta Kayden, I hope you are feeling better." Elful and unspoke. "I am. But I had to come and warn you. You have to delay the challenge." Landon tilted his head warily at Kayden. "What do you mean?" "The contract states that the alphas of the Silver Arrow Pack and the Moon River Pack will meet for the challenge." The Beta spoke. "So Aaron and Bradley made a deal. Aaron relinquished the alpha title to his father until the challenge is over, so that Bradley will fight Landon instead." "What?" Disbelief flashed through Alpha Landon's eyes. "But the transfer of the alpha title, especially not by means of retirement or death, needs approval and witnessing by the Beta, Delta and Gamma of the pack," Luna Olwen said, staring at Kayden with a conflicted look. Surely Delta Jason Gamma Edric would not have stood for this. At those words, sorrow filled Kayden's expression, and his gaze dropped down to the floor. When he next talked, his words were quieter and shaky. "Jason and Edgar are both dead. Chapter 30 for penitent some time ago." Kayden frowned as he headed to the Alpha's office that morning, having been summoned. Ever since they'd returned from the function, he hadn't received much of an order from Alpha Aaron. The latest update he'd heard the day before was that Luna Kylie had been rejected and exiled from the Silver Arrow Pack. Bradley, who had taken over most of the work while they were away, had also not been at his most approachable after the whole losing half of the pack thing. And to make things worse, the remainder that stayed had ignored or talked down to their alpha and their alpha after hearing of Kylie's stunt at the function. Kayden didn't question Alpha Aaron's decision, however. As much as he had tried to put up with her, Kylie was a terrible Luna, and it seemed that her outrageous attempt to pierce Olwen with Wolfsbane had finally been the last straw for her chosen mate. Believe it or not, though, that was not the most pressing thing on Kayden's mind. He'd lost all hope of finding his family after they cut ties with the Silver Arrow Pack, only for his daughter to reappear mated to the Moon River Pack Beta, and Olwen to be their new Luna. It stunned to realize this. But Stella was a lot happier in her new environment, and with her mate than she had been during her last few months in the Silver Arrow Pack once her best friend had left. He deserved the treatment he received from her, especially after her demand that he leave their old pack. Why hadn't he said yes? Perhaps he had hoped for more time to think over things. He'd been training to be the Beta of the Silver Arrow Pack for years before actually becoming the Beta, and serving Alpha Bradley, his childhood friend, and then Bradley's son. Things had been bad enough as it was, and his reluctance to leave behind the pack he'd dedicated his life to only led to him pushing not only Stella, but Kale and Sylvie further away. It hadn't escaped him that he had smelled their scents around the pack as he watched over an unconscious Kylie, but never saw them in person aside from Stella. His daughter had been right though. The Silver Arrow Pack had started falling apart before the function, and it was only worse now. The hope of maintaining or even saving what dignity was left was quickly slipping out of his grasp. Kayden headed down the corridor and knocked the door of the Alpha's office. "Come in," came Aaron's voice. Beta Kayden unturned the doorknob and went in, seeing Alpha, Aaron and Bradley already inside. Much to his confusion, two other pack members were also standing with them. Warriors Paulians I know. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. He bowed his head to Aaron before his eyes flickered to Bradley and then the two warriors. Why are Paulians I know here? Aaron's eyes flickered towards his father for a heartbeat before settling back on Beta Kayden. I received a message from Alpha and of the Moon River Pack late last night. He's requesting for a challenge. Now this was news. Not unexpected, but news nonetheless. Have you responded? After some deep discussions with my father, yes. Aaron replied, his tone and expression unreadable. We came up with a solution that will allow us to overcome this obstacle. Kayden tilted his head curiously. He'd seen Norfolk at her multiple times, and the man was strong. Yes, Aaron was too, but he imagined they were pretty closely matched. What made Aaron confident he would defeat the other Alpha? The question was most likely already written on Kayden's face, as Aaron motioned to his father, who cleared his throat. As capable as my son is, he is still having issues with his wolf. Bradley spoke, casting Aaron a sideways glare. So for the duration of the challenge, Aaron has agreed to briefly relinquish the Alpha title to me. What? Kayden looked at Bradley and then Aaron, confused and taken aback. Isn't that considered cheating? Bradley chuckles and shakes his head. The contract states that the challenge is between the Alpha of the Silver Arrow Pack and the Alpha of the Moon River Pack. They don't state names, and thus while he could sign the contract as Alpha Aaron, the arrangement will still be considered valid as he was Alpha at the time it was signed, even if he is not the Alpha at the time of the challenge. Kayden wanted to protest some more, but the expression on Bradley's face made him decide to address something else. That doesn't exactly answer my question though. Alpha Aaron. Kayden knew the transfer of the Alpha title, aside from my death or retirement, could only be carried out with the presence and consent of the Beta, Delta and Gamma. Something flashed in Aaron's eyes. Paulians I know are the new Delta and Gamma of the Silver Arrow Pack. Kayden's eyes widened in surprise, and he briefly glanced at the two men. He knew their strength and power in combat, but right now they just stared at the carpeted floor and seemed to be trying to make themselves as invisible as possible. What happened to Delta Jace and Gamma Edric? Jace and Edric were found dead in the forest, towards the north entrance last night. Bradley cut in before Aaron could reply. The man's face looked solemn, but devoid of genuine sadness or grief. It seems that some rogues attempted to invade the Silver Arrow Pack while everyone was asleep. Jace and Edric fought bravely, but they could have been taken by surprise. When Aaron found them, both their necks had been snapped. Beta Kayden had his heart in his throat as he heard Bradley speak. That didn't sound like Delta Jace and Gamma Edric at all. They were rather capable fighters. He'd seen them train himself. He couldn't envision them being killed by rogues unless they were exceptionally strong or of large numbers. Their families have been quietly notified, and their bodies have been given a personal burial. Aaron went on. I thought it best not to announce it formally given the current state of the pack. But as tragic as the loss of Jace and Edric are, Aaron continued. With the challenge quickly approaching, the transfer of the Alpha title must happen now. Kayden hesitated. I understand the urgency, but wouldn't it have been better to inform me of this earlier or discuss it with me even? We didn't think there was a need. Objectively speaking, transferring the title is the best option we have now, Bradley said, watching Kayden with an intent look. And given you've served me and now Alpha Aaron, I didn't think you would object. Isn't that correct? The last part of that question seemed to echo through the office, making the new Delta and Gamma shrink in on themselves even more. No major objections. Bradley, Alpha Aaron. Kayden spoke slowly, addressing them with a measured expression, but could you at least give me a few hours to absorb all of this information? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. A lot to take in at once. Aaron and Bradley exchanged a look before Aaron answered. Very well. We expect to see you back in this office at 6 in the evening. And Aaron, while I head out of the Silver Arrow pack, use the precious time to appoint a more capable Luna. Bradley said sternly. Time is of the essence. Yes, Dad. Something flickered through Aaron's green eyes but disappeared just as quickly. This pack will have a better Luna by the time you return. Yes, Alpha. Kayden bowed and turned and left the room. He made it back through the hallway and into the lift, and as soon as the elevator doors closed, he felt his knees buckle slightly and had to prop himself up by the wall. Nevertheless, he knew where he had to look. Gamma Edric hadn't found his mate yet at the time of his death, and the rest of his family had already departed for another pack with the others while the Alpha, Luna and Beta were away. That left Delta Jace's family, and after taking a brief detour to buy a small bouquet of condolences flowers, Beta Kayden headed for the home. Jace's mate Maya opened the door with puffy eyes and a weak smile. Cradling their son Eddie in her arms, Beta Kayden's heart broke at the sight. May I come in? Maya hesitated briefly, her eyes flickering behind and around the Beta before she nodded warily. She quietly stepped aside and closed the door as Kayden walked into the dining room and sat down. Alpha Aaron told me what happened. I'm so sorry for your loss. Jace was a good man, and a strong member of our pack. Maya's eyes didn't meet his as she stared at the table in front of them. Thank you. Alpha Aaron informed me to keep things quiet for now. She said nothing more, but produced a folded piece of paper and pushed it across the table to the Beta. Beta Kayden grasped the paper and unfolded it, immediately recognizing Delta Jace's handwriting. My dear Maya, I have been summoned out to the north entrance of pack territory by Alpha Aaron. Whatever happens to me, just take care of our son. As much as I fear what could occur to him if he left this pack at such a vulnerable stage of his life, staying could be worse. I trust your judgment, Maya, whatever you choose to do. Remember to keep our son safe. I love you both, Jace. Kayden swallowed thickly upon seeing the letter before pushing it gently back to Maya. I understand. Please, have a good evening. He stood up, owing to Maya and her infant son one final time before leaving. He wasn't surprised that Jace and Edric had been summoned to the north entrance rather than having gone there of their own accord, but he had to be sure. He recalled that the entrance had a camera hidden at the gate, so surely there must have been some footage of whatever happened. Right. Kayden quietly made his way through the edge of pack territory with his wolf Courson, using his dark grey pelt to camouflage himself under the shade of the trees. Once the north entrance came in sight, he shifted back and bundled the cloak around before approaching. He knew where the camera was, and if he could speak to or distract the guard on duty somehow, he could see if the camera footage had been tampered with or removed. As he approached the area, though, he frowned when he realized that there was no one stationed there. Just moments before, a familiar scent came to his nose and the alderman stepped out from behind a tree, having cloaked his scent. "Don't worry, I sent the guard away 5 minutes ago." Bradley spoke far too casually, approaching his friend. Feeling Courson emit a warning growl within him, Kayden tensed. Of course they'd known he was having second thoughts the moment. He suggested giving him some time to think. "It was you, wasn't it?" Feeling a torrent of emotions warring at each other. He didn't even need to clarify before Bradley nonchalantly nodded, pushing himself off the tree trunk. "I knew Delta Jace and Gamma Edric would be more hesitant in agreeing to our methods in winning the challenge against the Alpha of the Moon River Pack." Taking a few steps towards Kayden, "So with my son's permission I took some precautions." Kayden couldn't control the rage and grief that was bubbling up beneath the surface. "You trained both Jace and Edric yourself. We practically watched them grow before they were appointed Delta and Gamma, perhaps." Bradley's face remained impassive. "But the Silver Arrow Pack has fallen on desperate times, and the pack does not need individuals who don't understand the importance of survival." Courson growled even more loudly at Bradley's lack of guilt over what he had done. "Bradley." Kayden couldn't believe it had taken him so long to finally say this, but he absolutely had to now. "Haven't you ever thought that sometimes it's better to admit defeat? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing enthusiasm." Bradley's eyes flashed as he began to slowly stalk towards him. Kayden recognized that expression and movement, but never had it been directed at him. But he knew he couldn't stop now, had to let it all out. "All this happened because of you and Aaron," he began to snarl, his eyes shifting to Courson's. "If your son hadn't chosen to cheat on his fated mate, and you hadn't chosen to cover up for him, the Silver Arrow Pack would still be thriving. Olwen wouldn't have left. That terrible she-wolf wouldn't have become Luna. And my daughter wouldn't have had the dirt she needed to turn the rest of the pack against you and your son, as you claimed." Bradley shot forward and grabbed both sides of Kayden's head, his eyes dark as he silently threatened to do what he had done to his two previous victims. Olwen was the first Omega that had been fated to a Silver Arrow Pack Alpha. He replied with a low, cruel voice, "All I did was for the pack. How would the rest of the wilds have seen us? Better than how they see us now, after Luna Kylie embarrassed us at the function." Kayden argued, his hands grasping Bradley's arms and attempting to pry them off his head. "There is nothing at all wrong with having an Omega as a Luna. Own gazer are weak, you sentimental fool." The Alpha boomed, and before Kayden could realize what was happening, his arms were pushed back and Bradley's fist connected with his jaw. The Beta stumbled back, wincing but forcing the pain down. What a disappointment. Bradley spoke, continuing to step towards him menacingly. "I thought we were on the same side for this. You still have one more chance, otherwise you'll join our former Delta and Gamma." Beta Kayden inhaled and exhaled, his heart thudding in his chest. A moment of silence passed. "I, Kayden Anderson, renounce my position as Beta and member of the Silver Arrow Pack." "Very well." Bradley shifted into Bastion and lunged at Kayden. Kayden quickly shifted as well, Courson colliding with Bastion in the middle, the two large wolves gnashing and clawing at one another viciously. While Kayden's training and power as a Beta gave him an advantage compared to Jace and Edric against his former Alpha, Bradley was still ruthless and strong. Every attack that Courson fought to block and retaliate with his own, The more Coulson attempted to land a bite or a scratch on the other's flank, the fiercer Bastion became. The dark-furred wolf bit back a howl of pain as a clump of fur was torn from his shoulder, Bastion's teeth sinking into his flesh and drawing blood. Despite both Kayden and his wolf fighting bravely, Coulson eventually lay bloodied and exhausted. He hadn't had to fight like this in years, but they could not die here. The image of Sylvie and Saw flashed through their mind, as well as Stella and Kale. They had so much left to live for. Nevertheless, the wolf was losing blood fast, the red liquid staining his fur and grass around him. Bast encircled Coulson, snarling and closing in for the kill. "I will give you all the strength I have left," Kayden told his wolf as Coulson's flank rose and fell shallowly. "We don't have to win against Bradley and Bastion. We just have to stay alive. For the sake of our mate and our family. I failed them many times, but that ends now. Heal, stay awake, whatever you need to do. We have to warn the Moon River Pack." Coulson quietly emitted a snort, already channeling some of that strength to heal their wounds more quickly. "Took you long enough." Using both his humans and his own energy, Kayden's wolf also suppressed the excruciating pain he was in and shot to his paws, tearing away and out of the borders of the Silver Arrow Pack. Bradley shifted back into his regular form, seeing the trail of blood his now former friend had left behind in his wake. He snorted and shook his head. It was a shame that he had to do such a thing to the man whom he had been friends with growing up, and who had been his loyal Beta for years. But it had to be this way, or the Silver Arrow Pack would be well and truly done for. He knew where he had injured Kayden. If the man and his wolf didn't breathe, they would most likely collapse of exhaustion or get finished off by some rogues. With that, Bradley turned to find the nearest water source where he could wash off the blood staining his hands. Alpha Aaron, send someone to clean up the blood near the north entrance. He linked his son, and arrange for the appointment of a new beta. The video ends here, but the story goes on. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.